After talking with hundreds of retirees, I've noticed something surprising. Within the first few years of retirement, quite a few have said the exact same thing. I wish I hadn't bought that. Now, I'm not talking about just little impulse buys. I mean big, exciting purchases that they thought would make retirement better, but ended up becoming their biggest regrets. And so in this video, I want to walk you through 5 common purchases that retirees wish they could undo, and then how you can avoid making the same expensive mistakes. Now, by the way, most of the time, I'm encouraging people to spend their hard-earned money when they retire because I want you to enjoy it, to help give you the best life that you can have. And it's interesting because for most, it's a tough transition going from being a saver for decades, especially if you've done a great job saving, and then now to becoming a spender. But all that said, though, over the years, I've seen people make these big purchases and then they regretted it later. And that's what I'm talking about here today. Picture this, right? You retire, and then the idea of a vacation home, it feels perfect, right? You got that cozy beach house. Maybe you don't like the beach. Maybe you get a mountain cabin, right? It's ready whenever you want to escape. It's yours. You can go whenever you want. But here's what one couple I worked with discovered. They bought a condo, it was out in Florida. They were expecting, the endless sunny weekends. And after about 3 years, they realized that most of their time was just spent managing repairs, dealing with insurance, and paying property taxes, even when they weren't there. And, they said to me, we looked at it, it's Florida. They thought it would be, we thought it would be our paradise, but instead it felt like a second full-time job. Ask yourself, do you really want to be tied to one location every winter or maybe every summer? What if your interests change? What if you want to explore new places without the hassle of maintenance? So some alternatives maybe to consider here, and instead of buying, you could consider maybe renting a seasonal home or joining a home exchange program or maybe using Airbnb for variety and flexibility. If you want less stress and more freedom, then renting or swapping might be the smarter move for you. And speaking of expensive things that spend more time sitting still than actually being enjoyed, let's talk about the second one here, which is the brand new luxury car or RV. After decades of work, a shiny new car or an RV could feel like the ultimate reward, right? But the reality hits fast because that brand new luxury vehicle loses value by the thousands the moment you drive it off the lot. And I spoke with a retiree who bought a new RV. He was dreaming of road trips, dreaming of adventure, him and his wife. But about a year later, he said it was mostly parked. You had the upkeep costs, the insurance, the campsite fees, and all of this added up quickly. Have you thought about how often you'll realistically use a luxury vehicle or an RV? Maybe would renting one for vacations be better for your budget? So some alternatives maybe to consider are, maybe renting RVs or luxury cars, maybe leasing with some flexible terms, maybe joining travel clubs that promote access without the ownership hassles. The key lesson here, I think, is to test it out first before committing to a big purchase. Now, if you think an RV is pricey, regret number 3 is famous for draining wallets, even when it never leaves the dock. And that's because boats scream freedom, right? Sun, water, relaxation. But one retiree told me the best 2 days of ownership, the day we bought it and the day we sold it. Boats need constant maintenance, right? There's marina fees, insurance, there's unexpected repairs. And if you're not using it weekly, your cost per trip becomes sky high. Here's a quick story that one retiree shared with me. He had bought a small fishing boat. He was hoping to spend weekends out on the lake. And then after the first season, him and his wife were spending more time just cleaning, fixing, and paying bills than actually fishing. And for the next 2 summers, it just pretty much sat unused. And so think about it for you. Would you be happier maybe with a boat membership or rental access instead? Or maybe other alternatives to consider, like boat clubs or shared ownership or rentals, which can give you the experience without the stress and the cost. The key lesson here again is that ownership isn't for everyone, so try before you buy. The next regret is a little bit different. Many retirees want to help their adult children, maybe help with a down payment on a home or help by paying off student loans or maybe just helping with unexpected expenses as they come up. And as a parent myself, I can understand this. I can understand wanting to do everything that you can for your children. But unfortunately, I've seen retirees that have quietly drained their own retirement savings this way. And sometimes without really realizing the long term financial impact on their own retirement security. And this is a tough one, because when you do that one gift, it can create that unspoken expectation for more. So here's a question. Are you setting yourself up for financial risk by helping others? So some alternatives to consider here are, number one, set some clear boundaries. Maybe consider offering non-financial support instead of financial support, or maybe if you are going to offer the financial support, to create formal agreements to then protect your savings. And finally, let's talk about a regret that feels like just pure joy in the moment until that bill shows up. And that's the over-the-top dream vacation. You've been working for decades, you're now retired, and now you've got the time perhaps, and if financially you can afford to do so, then great. But some things just to kind of consider here are that, a once in a lifetime trip, it could sound perfect. Maybe it's a luxury cruise, maybe it's first class flights or first class hotels or whatever it might be. But I will tell you, one couple told me we spent so much on that one trip that we then had to cut back on our travel expenses for the next few years. Costs can balloon quickly, especially when you splurge on every upgrade or add multiple excursions or whatever the case might be. So ask yourself, can you have a memorable trip and still keep money in your pocket for maybe future, for some future adventures? Some alternatives to consider, of course, are, maybe to travel in the off season, maybe choose fewer upgrades, or maybe split trips into smaller getaways throughout the year, right? So there's some different things like that that you may want to consider. The lesson here is that dream vacations don't have to mean financial strain. If you plan smart, you might be able to keep exploring for many years to come. Retirement should be about freedom, not financial regret. And some of the things that we think will bring joy could end up just adding stress instead. Those dream purchases that they look perfect on paper often feel very different in real life. And so before you make a big decision, ask yourself, will this really give me happiness? Will this give me peace? Or, is this really what I want? And so if you want help creating a retirement income plan that gives you freedom, gives you flexibility and security without falling into these common traps, then click on the link below to learn more and schedule a call with me. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.